Welcome.
Thank you.
We asked a number of university presidents to come and represent the old world of education on stage today, and they all said no. Sebastian, why do you think that is?
Oh my God, I think it's an interesting time for higher education to really understand where we're going. What I would love to see is much more experimentation, people just diving in and trying out new things. There's a kind of a language in the state of California that the old model is the only model out, and it's a great model. I have nothing against face-to-face education. But I think given that we're in the 21st century, we have new technologies, it's really time to try something new.
And I think that's the great challenge. I serve on the UC Board of Regents, the CSU, the California State Universities System Board of Trustees. And the problem for us is our success. And as a consequence, our unwillingness to dramatically change our behavior. So we've been debating the last number of years about this new crisis, and that's the lack of state support for higher education. And that's been substantive. Crisis is overused word, but nonetheless, I think apt here because we've cut, for example, in the last 18 months, the UC budget and the CSU budget by over $2 billion. And as a consequence, everyone knows this, in the last number of years, in fact, the last 6 years, we've doubled tuition at the UC and CSU's, more than tripled it since 2001. The concern now of quality, because we're not paying our faculty what other private universities and some other public universities are paying, becomes problematic. And so all of these things are now creating an opportunity to have a different conversation, a conversation that Sebastian has been on the forefront of, and other quote-unquote MOOCs, this world of MOOCs with Coursera and edX and others. And this idea of online education is taking shape and now taking a lot of traction. And the debate, I think, is a long overdue and formidable one.
Gavin, you told me that your own staff advised you not to get on stage with Sebastian, so.
Well, like I said, when things are going well, you want to get along. And as a region, there's a lot of mixed reviews on higher ed. A lot of folks are threatened by it. Faculty is very concerned about it. We've had an institution that every year outperforms other institutions around the world, so people are saying, why screw up a good thing? You know, we're still one of the top 10 universities, Berkeley, one of the top 10 universities, UCLA, always in the top 10 or 12, other UCs, 7 of the top 50 highest performing universities in the world are UCs. Our CSU is really the workhorse of American education. Why screw up a good thing? And so from my perspective, that question is amplified back at the office because they're saying, well, why associate yourself with Sebastian? He wants to disrupt it.
Why
Sebastian has a radical new view of higher education, and if it doesn't work out, the fact that you're sitting up here on stage may not work out for you so well. So Sebastian, do you think, are you a threat, do you think, to higher ed, or do you think you're complementing it and doing and offering something that can run in parallel with the system as we know it?
Yeah, I don't see myself as a threat to the existing education system, and it's been discussed this way because that's the first reaction that people have in the higher ed system to understand, wow, what's going to happen to me if we find a new way of educating. But we leave so many students behind. In the state of California alone, it's about 470,000 students who are willing to enroll and pay full tuition. But if you look a little bit broader, China has 20 million freshmen this year. And then there's a huge gap in the professional development side of building software engineers. There's no single startup company here who wouldn't love to hire more software engineers. It's so extreme that companies come to us and say, write us a check and say, please, please, put out a curriculum that gets people trained to understand what the industry needs. There's a huge vacuum. So I think what I'm focusing on is this opportunity that is way outside existing higher education. We can really provide lifelong education, international education, education to people who are economically disadvantaged, and so on.
Why do you think it's a mistake that we graduate more bachelors in psychology than engineering?
So it turns out we do graduate more bachelors in psychology than engineering, and I want to see a single person in this room saying, yes, I want to hire more psychologists and software engineers. I have nothing against psychology, and it's really important to have a diverse set of skills in a nation. But there's a huge shortage, in my opinion, of great software engineers. big data scientists, cybersecurity scientists. And those technical fields are really what drives forward Silicon Valley and the nation as a whole. When I talk to companies like partner companies like Google and AT&T, very few of them ever come to me and say, we need more psychologists or English majors. They all come to me and say, look, give us technical talent so we can build better products and get on the market.
The backdrop of this is self-evident to everybody. Look, you've got a system of higher education that's not sustainable, period, exclamation point, from my perspective. We've talked so much in the last year or two about the debt crisis. That's self-evident to everybody in this room. The higher costs, self-evident to everybody. The issues of access, the inability to access higher education. But for me, it becomes a more fundamental question. What kind of world are we living in? What are the trend lines that define this world? Are we conveying enough talent to meet the needs of jobs that exist today, let alone the jobs that will exist tomorrow? As Sebastian, he loves to point out this stat, and it's a wonderful stat. The Labor Department came out suggesting that 65% of grade school kids are going to have a job that hasn't even been invented yet. Are we, as a system of higher learning, particularly California that's been on the vanguard, we've been the leader, are we prepared to advance the workforce development, the human capital, for that workforce, again, of today, let alone the future? That skills gap is widening in real time. We can't afford to fail more efficiently. This is code red, and we have to do something, I think, dramatic. And if it's disruptive, it's worth, I think, leaning in and making the case that there's alternative pedagogy of learning, and that the opportunity to use technology and use the tools of technology that Sebastian and his colleagues have advanced, I think could be extraordinarily advantageous and start plugging those gaps.
So do either of you think it's okay for online education to divorce itself from academia entirely, just become a job training platform?
I think divorcing from academia is kind of a binary word. I think there's an educational need that goes across the entire population in many different ways. There's an educational need for critical thinking and a broad set of mind. And then there's a vocational need where people have to have skills that are really necessary tomorrow morning to execute your job. I think what Governor Newsom just really so nicely pronounced is a change of the skills gap that is really affecting the nation. When my great-great-great-parents lived, one education was actually sufficient, and things didn't move that fast. But thanks to everybody at TechCrunch, the world is on fire, and things are moving extremely fast. In my own field, computer science, my education expires after 5 to 10 years. 5 to 10 years, and everything is new. The cloud is new, Facebook is new, Twitter is new, Google is new. A lot of new things can do, new programming languages. Historically, what we've done is we really sliced human life into basically 4 slices or 5 slices. One is a play phase the first 5 years, and then a learn phase the next 20 years, a work phase, and a kind of resting phase afterwards, and maybe eventually a die. What I think we should really doing is we should interleave these phases and have them all at the same time. We should play, we should learn, we should work and rest at the same time, because the world moves so fast today, we can't really afford having a single slice of education anymore. We really have to stay up to date. And for example, we work with AT&T. AT&T is the first one to point out that what we do is not benefiting just the new kids on the block, it's benefiting the existing workforce. They have about 100,000+ engineers, and those engineers have to stay up to date. When something new comes along, like a cybersecurity threat or a big data opportunity, they really care about that the existing engineers get those skill sets. And that's a fundamentally new vision, I think, of education than is typically portrayed by academia, which says, look, get your degree, and once you have a degree, you're done for the rest of your life.
It's an extraordinary thing, honestly. You think of all the disruption in this world, in every facet, every industry. I mean, from media, financial services, you talked about the share economy just a moment ago, et cetera. The one, if you went back in time 200 years ago, it would look like contemporary classroom today in terms of most of these sort of professor-student relationships, this broadcast model of academia that still exists today in some of the finest universities in the world. It's a remarkable thing, honestly. We're not even indulging in the K through 12, where people are lined up in rows of desks based on their data manufacture, the same, I mean, it's comedic in some ways. And the big raging debates are around seniority and tenure, which seem pretty trivial, again, in the context of the world that we're leaning in and living in. So I think what Sebastian is offering is something that is imaginative, but most importantly, he's not just talking about taking a lecture and putting it online. He's talking about a whole new model of education that takes the latest in terms of how we learn and incorporates it into a new platform of engagement that arguably will make learning more interesting, meaningful, and, as Sebastian points out, lifelong.
So, breaking, Sebastian, you're not just paying lip service to this, you actually have something to announce?
Yeah, so today we put up a website and announcing that we have an Open Education Alliance where a whole bunch of companies we've worked with in the past, new companies are working with us, and also, I guess, Khan Academy joined us, and we're talking to more educational outlets. And the idea is to, we got a lot of inquiries from industry to say, look, what our students that we graduate and come in are able to do is this, and what we want them to do is this thing over here. So can we participate in the creation of curriculum for higher education? And historically, that's been hard with universities because there's all kinds of conflicts between academia and industry. So what we just said is, this alliance is going to put industry first. It's going to put workforce first. So if you want to get a job at Google, or want to get a job at NVIDIA, or get a job at Autodesk, a job at Cloudera, what have you, come to us, and that's where you can learn the skills necessary. And we work with those companies to curate those skills and keep them up to date. So at any point in time, you can understand what the right skills are. We decided not just to make it a Udacity product, we decided to make it an industry-wide offering so we can really get multiple education providers involved and multiple companies involved. In fact, we're soon going to open up to a much broader set of companies to access our student CVs and so on. And I think what is hopefully going to be a bit of a platform to think about education in the 21st century. Like what is really needed in the workforce, what skills you need to find a job. And then it's not just us you can come to, it's anybody you can come to, and anybody should compete for building the best education product to really serve our workforce needs and our employment needs.
So a Google University, but sort of like the UC system. So a Khan Academy course would count as an Udacity course.
Yeah, I think if you call it Google University, my friends at Google get very nervous and so on. Let's call it an industry-wide alliance. So let's call it non-branded open education alliance, so everybody's invited to join.
And see, I love this. If this doesn't wake up the UC, CSU, and community colleges, I don't know what does. When we talk about it, I chair the Economic Development Commission in the state, and I won't give you my economic development speech. I'll save you from that. But you all know this. It's two Californias, not north and south. It's now coastal California and inland California. I left this morning from Marin County. In the July unemployment numbers, we'll get the new ones very soon, but 5.3 unemployment rate, 5.3%. You're down in Imperial County right now, 26.1% unemployment. We have a state with the fourth highest unemployment in the United States and hundreds of thousands of open jobs right now that we can't fill. And we have a system of higher learning that was designed over half a century ago for a world that no longer exists. And you know what the conversation was when the master plan was conceived? The conversation that Sebastian's been having with the private sector, but we're not having that conversation anymore. What do you need in all these companies? What does Salesforce.com need? What does Google need? What does Twitter, all these companies need? And are we conveying enough of that talent? The answer is clearly we're not. So you can't continue to do what you've done. We've got to radically alter our approach and start addressing this need. And so if it takes Sebastian on the outside to put some pressure on all of us on the inside, I say bring it on. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I'm very encouraged by his hard work and, most importantly, very enthusiastic about the next phase of his announcement as he scales this at a much larger level.
But
if you look at those numbers, by the way,
hasn't always been successful. I mean, what happened at San Jose State?
Well, first of all, the key to innovation, as everybody in the room knows, is fast iteration. Like try it out and learn from it, and try out again and learn from it. Now, the San Jose State thing has been in the news quite a bit, positively and negatively. Obviously, we opened with a big fanfare, and then our first set of numbers didn't look the same way on-campus numbers would look like. So our graduation rates were lower. It was largely an effect of involving inner-city high school kids. We talked to Gavin, we talked to Governor Brown and many others and said, look, there's a real need in California to get high school kids a chance. Most inner-city high school kids don't have access to, say, computer science education. We took this big hit that in the end, most of these kids weren't quite as prepared as a normal college student is. And that was spun against us, understandably. I mean, the California Faculty Association, which is the big union of the CSU, has the job of making sure that it's appropriately funded and education is appropriately funded. And with this big funding crisis going on, discussion going on that Gavin mentioned just a second ago, there's this big question, should we tell the governor and the lieutenant governor that there might be an alternative path or not? And obviously any moment of there might be an alternative path to education than, say, regular on-campus education could be construed as a threat, and we see the result of this, to be honest. What I actually think in response to this is, look, this is not about replacing or changing on-campus education. I'm actually a big fan of on-campus, and if I can ask Gavin to please increase the funds for both the UC and the CSU system, please do it, and the community college system, absolutely no question. Education is extremely important, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't stop innovating. It doesn't mean we should leave people out. There's many different paths in the world. San Jose State, for example, in the most recent round, over 90% of the students that came were out-of-state students and that weren't even in the CSU system. So we're actually reaching people in the entire world. Now, San Jose State, this little tiny university in Silicon Valley, can now go out and teach people in all countries for credit. That to me is a big success story.
Yeah. Look, I mean, life is circulinear, it's not linear. We are on a journey here. This is just the first phase. So people are quick to jump on this early example, but there's been, we've been doing, hey, this is just an interesting fact. We've been doing online education at the UC since the 90s, late 90s, just hasn't gotten a lot of attention. What's getting a lot of attention are these MOOCs, these massive online courses that Sebastian, Coursera, edX, and others are engaging in. And so like anything that's new, there's going to be breakthroughs, there's going to be some setbacks, but you have to be open argument, you can't be ideological, and as Sebastian says, as that great book, Built to Last, reminded us, it's the genius of and, not the tyranny of or. It's having that robust, interactive campus environment and the opportunity to rewind Sebastian when you get home or fast forward him because of your unique status as a student. Your world is unique, your expression is unique. It's not mass education anymore. It's individualized, it's personalized. Everyone learns differently. And as a consequence of this technology, we're able to bring those disciplines and that opportunity into a classroom and scale it to not just 20, 200, not just 20,000, but hundreds of thousands of people that are desperate for the opportunities to take advantage of this world.
10 years from now, are your kids, your toddlers, going to go to Udacity instead of Stanford?
How about yours? You have more
Well, you got a 5-year-old. I think so, I hope they're enrolled.
Yeah, I hope they're going to save myself the college money.
I'll tell you.
Or something else, maybe a fast car.
I've got a 3.5-year-old daughter that still runs up to the TV and doesn't know why it doesn't do this. You can't educate my daughter like I was educated. I thought she was a prodigy when she was 1, just watching her on the smartphone. She went on, I think it was a Vanity Fair magazine once in the house, and she didn't understand why the top of the magazine didn't flip. So there's no capacity to continue to do what we've done. There's old adage, continue to do what you've done, you'll get what you've got. Not in this world. Continue to do what you've done, you'll fall behind because that global average is rising. So we've got to get serious about this.
I agree.
And that's why I'm here with Sebastian.
It's really important to be creative about this. If we were to reinvent education today, would we really force every student in a classroom to go exactly at the same pace, think exactly the same thought at the same time, almost like an industry of drones, the way we educate today? Or would we go back and do what Sal Khan does so really well, which is give the kids to go at their own speed? For high school, for K through 12, he's shown that C-level math students can get to an A-level just by giving their own speed of progress. And if you spin this a little bit further, why wouldn't education be as much fun as video games? Right? So we have a Google class, for example, in HTML5. We launched on our second on mobile web development. And people there build games in HTML5 and compete for prizes as part of their class experience. And it's as much fun as anything. Why shouldn't education be fun? Why do you have so many teenagers that just walk away from education thinking that it's boring? I think there's a lot of old-fashioned things we can perpetuate that come from a world that was not digital, not interactive, not online, and we try to retain it. I think we should be creative.
Amen. I mean, I know my species. I'm a politician. So you hear people like me say this all the time. I happen to legitimately think this is one of the most important topics of conversation that we must be having, not just here in California, across this country and around the world. This is, as I said, code red. And we have got to wake up to this remarkable world all of you have created around us and the one that you're creating day in and day out. And our educational system is, it reminds me a bit of Kodak. You think you're doing fine, your quarterly reports come out, and the world you invented now is competing against you. And it's competing at a rate and speed that we've got to wake up, or we'll end up, I think, down that same path.
Are you comparing your
I don't
your
like that
employer
comparison.
to Kodak?
Just scrub that. No, I'm not. I mean, look, I love the UC and the CSU. I'm proud to be on. No finer institution of higher learning in the world, public institutions of learning in the world. But we can be so much more, but we've got to be willing to invest in our lead. If you don't invest in the future, you're not going to do very well there. We've got to invest in the future.
And I want to put in the pitch for the many entrepreneurs out here that do amazing stuff like Code Academy and Code.org, and there's a whole bunch of wonderful activities that I think will really shape the future. And that activity, I think, is really important for us going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.